things that I have the privilege of today is getting to introduce a very important man to y'all. I was told to share a few things that kind of affect us here as a small business in the state of Texas. And my name is Darren Bravenec. I'm the operations manager here at Texas Tool and Die. My dad is Bravenec. He's run the place since 1983. He's been an American trying to grow the American dream, trying to have like the whole, the white picket fence. Only for us, of course, is it was a white pipe fence. But one of the things that is really affecting us here is a lot of the false economics that we have coming from Washington, D.C., that this man is fighting very hard to defend our freedoms and prevent those bad policies from coming through. A really bad thing that is not really affecting us, but as far as our business directly, but a lot of the ones in the area, is the Affordable Care Act and just the huge cost that it's putting on companies, having to stop people from getting to have a full-time job because they're either cutting their hours down or they're having to let someone go completely. Now, like I said, that doesn't affect us directly, and we're very fortunate for that. But one thing that does affect us greatly is our president's idea that the wealthier Americans, such as my dad, are supposed to pay their fair share. But what he doesn't realize is someone like my dad works 7 days a week so he can have that American dream. So why should he have to pay more to support other people whenever they're not the ones out there working 7 days a week, or they might even be working 4 days a week and then quitting their job and saying, hey, I need unemployment for 3 years. Thank you, Mr. Obama. Those are just a few things that really, really bog us down and that hinder us greatly. But the real great thing and the important thing that we're all here today for is for Senator Cruz. I could not be more proud of this man, and I bet you even the Democrats include, I can speak for every Texan, we're very proud to have this man serving for us in Washington, D.C. I really think he's probably one of the best senators the state of Texas will ever have. He is one of the best conservatives I've ever seen. I had fun making phone calls for his campaign. I met many people on his campaign, and they're all great people, which lets you know that there's good leadership at the helm. And my favorite line I ever heard the man say was this little thing, when we started this race, we were at 2% in the polls with a 3% margin for error, so we could have been under zero. It's one of the things I loved hearing. But anyways, so y'all came here to see our great senator, Mr. Ted Cruz.
Thank you very much, Darren. It is great to be here. Thank you for welcoming me here. Thank you for everyone coming out. I'm sorry everyone stopped working for a few moments. I apologize for the impact on getting the job done today, but I appreciate your coming out. This is what America is all about. Small businesses. Small businesses have been the backbone of our economy. They have presented opportunity. 2/3 of all new jobs in our economy come from small businesses. If we want to turn around our economy, if we want to get Americans back to work, small businesses will be the engine for doing so, will be the key to doing so. And what I'd like to talk about is two things. Number one, the agenda in Washington that's making it harder and harder for small businesses to succeed. And number two, a positive pro-growth agenda that we should be pursuing instead. Number one, the anti-small business approach of Washington. Just a few days ago, I sat on the floor of the House of Representatives watching President Obama give his State of the Union speech. And that speech, in my view, was very disappointing. President Obama could have taken that as an opportunity to reach across the aisle, to find some real bipartisan cooperation on pro-growth policies and job creation. Instead, the speech he gave was unabashed liberalism. It was a speech that embraced doubling down on the policies of the last 4 years. More and more spending, more and more deficits, more and more debt, and more regulations that are strangling small businesses and killing jobs. And in particular, the policies the president laid out. Almost 2 to 1. If enacted, President Obama's policies would make life harder for young people coming out of school trying to find their first job. Would make life harder for African Americans and Hispanics struggling to climb the economic ladder. Would make life harder for small businesses that are creating jobs. Would make life harder for everyone working towards the American dream. I think that's unfortunate. Whether you're talking about cap and trade policies, which would drive up the cost for every small business, for every family that turns on a light switch or starts a car, whether you're talking about Obamacare that is putting crippling costs on small businesses and making it harder and harder for them to compete, particularly when the bigger businesses that are more politically connected, that have more friends in Washington, are able to get waivers from the burdens of Obamacare, while the struggling small businesses face the full burden of it. That's destroying jobs and opportunity. Or whether you're talking about the president's proposal to increase the minimum wage. He proposed increasing the minimum wage to $9. Now, anytime that happens, you know a couple of things will predictably happen. Number one, youth unemployment will go up. And number two, African American and Hispanic unemployment will go up. Those who are struggling to find their first jobs begin climbing the economic ladder. Every time you jack up the minimum wage, you drive those people beginning to climb the economic ladder out of a job. You know, I think back to my father when he came to Texas in 1957. He was 18. His first job was as a dishwasher, making 50 cents an hour. Now, the reason he got a job as a dishwasher is he couldn't speak English. And you didn't have to speak English to wash dishes. Now, if President Obama had his way and had increased the minimum wage to, say, $2 instead of 50 cents, my dad never could have been hired as a dishwasher. He never could have worked 7 days a week to pay his way through the University of Texas. He never could have gone on to start a small business of his own. Every one of these policies that expands government, that makes it harder for small businesses to succeed, makes it harder for those struggling to work towards the American dream. And the second point I want to make is I think despite the partisan, even sometimes toxic atmosphere in Washington, I remain hopeful that there is room for real bipartisan agreement and cooperation on pro-growth policies. That is something Republicans and Democrats should be able to agree with. My single-minded focus in the U.S. Senate is on growth and job creation, on getting our economy going. You know, of all the economic data that swirl about, the most troubling is 0.8%. That's what the economy has grown each year under President Obama. It's a fraction of our historical average, which has been 3.3% a year since World War II. If we can't get growth back to historical levels, 3, 4, 5%, we can't solve any of these problems we have. Without economic growth, the 23 million people who are struggling to find work won't be able to find jobs. Without economic growth, our federal balance sheet will remain a train wreck. And we should be able to find real bipartisan cooperation on tax reform, on regulatory reform, to help reduce the burden on small businesses so that they can create jobs and get our economy going. I've spent a considerable amount of time, even in these first few weeks in the Senate, trying to reach out to Democrats and see if we can work together on pro-growth policies, and I'll point to one small example of that, which is just a few weeks ago, I joined with 52 other senators in a bipartisan letter to President Barack Obama urging him to approve the Keystone Pipeline. We then appeared at a news conference with 10 senators total, 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans, urging the president to approve the pipeline and approve it now. And I'll tell you the arguments I laid out. I said, listen, in politics, in policy, sometimes there are hard decisions, there are easy decisions. Approving the Keystone Pipeline, in my opinion, and the opinion of all 10 senators who were at that press conference, is a no-brainer. For 4 different reasons. Number one, for economic growth and job creation. With the stroke of a pen, President Obama could remove the government impediments to creating over 10,000 high-paying jobs. Number two, from a national security perspective. If we don't build that pipeline and bring oil from our friend Canada to the north, we will continue to remain more and more dependent on overseas oil, much of which is from nations whose interests are very different